This is the Dork Side News Network, and this just in.
Hey guys, this is the Dork Side News Network, and Ed is just in. We have another interview going on. I'm James.
I'm Richard.
And I'm Frankie.
And we have our first remote interview. And what's your name, sir?
My name is Ed Kuehnel, and I am talking to you live from Portland, Oregon.
That is not Vegas, where we live. So this is our first internet interview. So
that's why his place has so much more character than ours does.
Yeah.
Like, just looks cooler than the Las Vegas drywall track homes.
Yeah, exactly. So do you go by Edward or Ed?
Ed is just fine.
All right, Ed. So we know why you're on the show, but why would you say we wanted to interview you?
Well, there could be a lot of reasons, but let's focus. Let's be professional. Let's focus on the professional stuff. I have been a game designer and game writer since 2001. Most recently, one of my good friends and co-writers, actually, we've worked on a lot of games together, but we created a comic book called Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia. And just the elevator pitch there is a disgruntled professional wrestler declares himself galactic champion of the universe. A planet of alien wrestlers hears about this, use it as a declaration of war.
That sounds something I would read constantly. That sounds hilarious and awesome. I hope it's hilarious and not a.
We think it's an action comedy. The response we've gotten so far is very good to both. Matt and I both, even with video games, we kind of specialize in humor, lighthearted stuff. I was even actually I was a contributor to The Onion for a year for that website.
I saw that on your resume, and that is I love that.
Leisure Suit Larry was one of the game we worked on together. We worked on some real fun stuff. If anyone's familiar with Twisted Pixel games, they made some real irreverent, just goofy stuff that we worked on for them.
I feel like I know Twisted Pixel.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Is there any games that you could say that I might remember?
Yeah, well, a big hit was Splosion Man.
Oh, yeah, I remember Splosion Man.
Okay, yeah, I remember this.
We worked on, they made some titles. Loco Cycle. The Gunstringer was one I worked on that it was Microsoft Connect.
I don't have an Xbox, nor do I have a Kinect, so I wouldn't have seen that one. But
a lot of people, yeah. So we created this comic book. We self-published the first couple issues, and we actually found a publisher with Starburns Industries Press. It's the comic book publishing arm of Starburns Industries, who brings us the Rick and Morty cartoons.
Oh,
wow.
I was like, why do I feel like I know this name? I've heard it before. But that's why.
That's their catchphrase. So they're new to comics, but they've had a lot of success in television with Rick and Morty and other things. And so they're creating kind of a niche for themselves. And the way they describe it is, I'm trying to get this right, but funny, sad, touching stories, So Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia for me, it's primarily a comedy action title, but it's also a real story about the protagonist, rock and roll Rory Landell, and he does have an emotional journey through this first story arc, which is 6 issues. The 3rd issue is in the can. So what's going to happen is Starburns is going to re-release the first 2 and release the 3rd for the first time electronically.
Okay.
And but at the same time, they have an issue called Starburns Presents. Starburns Presents number 2 will be out on Free Comic Book Day, everywhere.
Yeah,
because it's free, so everybody's or every comic book store orders it because it's free. But 8 pages of our first issue, Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia, will be in Starburns Presents number 2 on Free Comic Book Day. So if you're in a book shop, you're at your local, you can pick it up, see the first 8 pages from issue 1, and You can see for yourself if you think it's worth your time.
Oh, I already feel like I think it's worth my time.
That is a huge deal. I mean, we talk with a lot of indie comic book artists, and to have that kind of coverage is amazing. I mean, that.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'm also a huge fan of Justin Roiland himself. So just you being in with Starburns is awesome.
Is Starburns
it's
a
really-
reference to the guy from the Man Community? Is that what they mean?
Right. So I think it's Dino. Tough to pronounce his last name. Stanatolis. He is along with. He's one of the founders of Starburns, and he played. I guess he played Starburns.
That's
on
awesome.
the acting. So he's an he was the act. Obviously he was acting on that
Yeah.
show, but he's primarily I think a writer and a creator, and co-founded this. With Dan Harmon and some other people, founded this founded Starburns, and so we were really lucky. We're really lucky to find them, and we're really excited about being with Starburns. But we also think they were kind of the perfect fit for us because they do want to do sort of irreverent stuff that's a little different, and we're interested in humor. So we're I think a great fit, and
Yeah.
it is exciting to have a publisher and to be in part of Comic Book Day and being new at this and having published only 2 issues before we were able to find a home was real exciting to us.
So who's doing what on the title?
Yeah, so it's myself. Again, I'm Ed, and my co-writer friend Matt Enton, whom I've done written a lot of games and other things with. We wrote on a comedy action film called Lumberjack Man. Very proud of. And so he and I created this thing, and we're the writers behind it. And we hired some real professional artists. Our day jobs are writing for comic books. So we decided to, what could we do to spend a lot of money? And so, but we had this story about this wrestler who got really fed up with this promoter and was denied his shot at the world belt, right? So Rory, the inciting incident is Rory gets screwed over by the promoter. Promoter says, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to give you the world belt. So he gets pissed, makes his own belt out of just stuff laying around, and instead of cutting the promo he's supposed to cut, he goes on live television right before this pay-per-view he's supposed to be on. He says, I don't care about the world belt, I'm the galactic champion of the universe, brother. And so that of course sets the whole thing in motion. The TV signal goes out into space. Now it takes some time, right?
Yeah.
So it's not until like 15 years later that the Wrestletopians intercept this signal and get pissed. And by that time, of course, Rory, like a lot of wrestlers, time hasn't been so kind.
Yeah.
He's like drinking away his sorrows in a bar in a small town, and no one knows where he is. But to answer your question, so we hired some professional artists to do this. It's a good looking book, and I don't know how much people can see.
Yeah, I definitely. That's an awesome cover. If you guys can't see it, hear it. Awesome, awesome
Scotty.
art too.
Dan Scotty, whose name no one can pronounce, but his name's Dan Scotty, who's doing a lot of cool stuff for like Dynamite, Dark Horse, those kinds of for professional publishers. Did the art for the first 3 issues. Marissa Louise, our colorist, she does a ton of stuff. She works for DC. She's doing Hex Wives right now, which is a Vertigo title. And lettering is done by A Larger World is the name of their company. But there's this guy, Dave Lanphier, who lettered the first issues, did a great job. And that's kind of the core team for these first 3. And so, yeah, it looks really great. There's a wrestling bear.
Going back to the story of it, it sounds, when you said that there is a wrestler that declares himself galactic champion, I honestly believe I can think of at least 5 wrestlers that would probably actually do that in real life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a based on true life story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that is the hook. And in fact, so my writing, partner, my co-creator, Matt, wrote some great dialogue, and for the actual moment when Rock and Roll Rory Landell, again our protagonist, makes this declaration. And I won't consider it bragging if I read it, because it's not my dialogue, it's Matt's dialogue. But he's yelling at the camera and he says, "And it don't matter where you go, Daddy. Venus, Pluto, Saturn, Rock and Roll Rory Landell is the champion of the universe. There could be a Martian 50 feet tall with 20 arms, each with 24-inch bicep. And I'd have him laid out on his Martian back, 1, 2, 3 count. And with his last smell of Martian breath, he'd say, Landell, you one rude rockin' dude with a bad tooth."
That's
not
awesome.
mine. I'm not laughing at my own joke.
I laugh at my own jokes anyway, so I do it.
No shame in it. But that's one of my favorite bits, really, in the whole 6-issue arc is that.
So you are also a writer for video games, right?
Yeah.
How did you fall into that? Because there's definitely a couple people I know listening that would want to get into that and figure out.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's one of those things where if you go around and you ask people, like, how did you fall into it? Especially people who maybe been in it for quite a few years now, you'll always get like a different story.
Yeah,
which is not always super helpful. But I was just inspired by the adventure games of old. Sierra, like the King's Quest, and the old arts, like Monkey Island was like my favorite. And I can really remember thinking, young, maybe not even in high school, but just thinking like, man, someone had to come up with a story, say for a Monkey Island or even a Leisure Suit Larry. Someone had to come up with these jokes, and I don't know who that person is, but I want to be that person. So it took me some time. When I finally broke in 2001, there still wasn't a very clear path to breaking into video games. But I broke into a studio called High Voltage Software out near Chicago as an assistant producer. And I got that job because I was a little overqualified for it. I had an MBA, and I even started taking some programming classes because I heard that, I knew I'd never be a programmer, but I heard that if you knew a little programming, your shot at getting a game design job was greater.
Yeah.
So I snuck in as an assistant producer, started learning the ropes there. The High Voltage Software is still around. Great studio to start because they do everything in-house, all the art, all the programming, all the sound and audio. Had a studio. They even had a motion capture studio, which was state of the art at the time. And of course, game designers there as well. So I spent 5 years at that studio learning everything, transitioned to a sort of game design creative role. And that's where we got the Leisure Suit Larry game. Kind of fell in our laps. Vivendi Universal was looking for a developer to make it for them, and we somehow got it. There's a lot of writing in there, obviously, and it kind of fell to me. And I did, I guess, well enough with the writing and the humor to for the rest of the team to say, okay, great, take it and run with it. We hired Matt because there was so much of it, and he came in, did a great job. And both him and I somehow managed, the writing was pretty well received by people who are into sort of crude humor.
That's definitely me.
Yeah.
I love the dirty jokes, dad jokes, puns, all that stuff, and that's definitely a Leisure Suit Larry thing right there.
Certainly not everybody loved it. I think PC Gamer gave it a 5 out of 100, if I remember correctly.
That's gonna hurt your heart.
But a lot of people really responded, at least to the writing part. And so 5 years of being at that studio, the industry's small. I'd made a lot of contacts. The studio hit kind of hard times. I was laid off along with a lot of other people, and Matt was laid off. That's actually instantly when we started. We were unemployed and we started getting together. at his apartment in Chicago and coming up with ideas for stories. And we were actually writing screenplays at the time. And one of the stories was this invasion from Planet Wrestletopia. And which we originally wrote as a screenplay. But what happened was people started calling me for gigs and this to do some writing for their game. And this is 2006. And honestly, I think there maybe were a handful of freelance game writers at the time that I was aware of. And I certainly didn't think it could be a full-time job at all. I was like, okay, fine. This will be some money. And, this is better than nothing. But I had no plans to pursue it as a full-time job. But, things kind of snowballed and word of mouth. And I did have to take a job for a while, but I gradually started getting enough writing gigs to where I was able to quit that job, which was sort of just a bridge job, I guess, or whatever, and just do this full time. And now it's 2019, and it's been getting progressively better. The quality of clients has gotten better. The jobs have gotten better. I got to work on Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle.
I saw that also. That was a strange, awesome combination of things to happen.
Blast. Even the stuff I'm working on now, I'm working on this Always Sunny in Philadelphia mobile game, which has been really fun.
Oh, that'll probably do a lot of people like that. I was looking at the list of games that High Voltage is currently making still, just so people know, like they're still around, because he was saying, like, they hit some hard times. They actually made Injustice, and we were just talking about that in our last podcast.
Oh, did they? Okay. Now, did they make it, or did they help with like some DLC or stuff like that, or was it them?
It was so all I have is under Wikipedia games developed.
Yeah.
So it could be half credits or.
Injustice had a lot of
they were one of the developers for sure. I think they helped out for sure with that. I think a lot of it done. I think it was done by a couple different developers, but yes. Yeah, High Voltage did contribute to that for sure.
Which is funny, because our last segment on our last podcast that we recorded right before we started the interview with you, we had an entire segment on how story plays into video games and if it's important or not. And I mean, here you are telling us,
I should have come last time.
Well, so what is your thought? Like, so our segment was talking about how, at least for American video games, there's been a large migration of games that were traditionally story-based, kind of migrating to just multiplayer and kind of competitive PvP. And how
there's a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say right now, what I hear from my sort of colleagues is that publishers, the people who finance video games, and the people who really are kind of have their finger on the pulse of what's selling as much or not more than anyone, are not investing much in the single player experience. For this, exactly what you said, what's hot right now, what people want, these big multiplayer experiences, So the emphasis. So if you're interested in making a single player experience a strong story, you probably need to have the money to finance that on your own.
I feel like you need to have the money to finance that, or you have to have a big name behind you, like Square Enix or something. And if you say, like, I'm one of those people where if it was like Square Enix just made another game, we're not even going to tell you what it's about. I'll be like, okay, I'm buying it. I don't know, but I'm buying it.
In black box, it just says Square Enix.
I was a Telltale fanboy. I mean, I didn't get everything that they made because I just didn't have time, but I that was right up my alley.
I love the Telltale games, and I continued to buy them for about 3 games before I realized I didn't have time to actually play them. And I was like,
hopefully you still can play them. I hope you are still able to.
And I would like to take this to segue into another one of my favorite games, Borderlands, as a Tales of Borderlands games. But I just have to mention Borderlands in basically all of our podcasts. So
Oh, sure. I've never played them in my life, but yes, they're great. I know lots of people love those games.
So do you think, because we had this conversation just recently, do you think games stories are declining from games past, like on older consoles like Super Nintendo and like original PlayStation stuff? Do you think the stories are they're just disappearing?
I think that for the games in which the story is quite important, I actually think the writing and storytelling is getting better. We're just, as you would expect, right? The video game industry is quite young. People would compare if you're going to make a comparison to the film industry, people say, well, we might still be in our silent movie era.
Yeah.
Young. But as you would expect, things like the writing, the storytelling, voice acting are all getting better. But perhaps those types of games where the story is really important, the number of those is perhaps shrinking.
Yeah.
Right now. But I don't think that's forever.
I sure hope not, because those are the types of games I like to play. Well, I don't like to have an internet connected, I must play this on the internet game all the time. I want my Final Fantasies and I want my Tales.
I just think he touched on a key point, because Spider-Man came out, God of War came out. Yep. These are some amazing, great story-based games. But whereas everything else is sort of multiplying, I feel like we're getting the same number of story-based games that we used to, which feels like not very many.
Yeah.
Because there's so many.
I would like to point out, too, the two games you mentioned were on PlayStation 4 exclusive. So,
and you can't, like,
fine,
Naughty Dog.
Crackdown.
Naughty Dog, PlayStation exclusive, maybe still. The stuff they do at Naughty Dog is so great because, I mean, the stories are the same quality. The stories are amazing quality, but the gameplay is also there.
Yeah, I absolutely love Naughty Dog.
I love me some Jack and Dexter.
Yeah, I feel like it's the same with BioWare and Bethesda, except recently they've kind of been like,
Yeah, it's been a while. I went through. I mean, when I was more of a PC gamer, I played a lot of BioWare, and I haven't been a PC gamer in a while. But
so what do you play now?
What's that? I'm sorry.
What do you play now?
So I have not much, to tell you the truth, but we're a console family. I actually have so I'll tell you this real quick. We moved into this house where the owners left behind 2 televisions. And here you can have them. So I was like, all right. So they had this den, and I was like, I told my kids, I'm like, this will be your game room. So like most families, we had 2 TVs already. So now I have 4. So I have 3 TVs in this game room. My boys, they're kind of spoiled. They each have their own Xbox, so they don't have to fight over an Xbox. They each have their own TV, and then on the other TV, I have a Switch and a PS4 with VR, and I play I never get to touch them. Like I never, I'm like too busy. They're always in there playing. I have Steam. I don't play it much. So I guess if I'm playing something, it's on it's on a console. I don't even really have PC per se anymore. But
I think he's saying PC is not Master Race now. That might be blasphemy to some people.
Not for him.
And probably most of the stuff, for whatever reason, of the games I work on tend to all be console games, or at least some of them are on Steam, but they're all of them are on a console, or I guess I could play them on my iPad.
So you being a writer, I do have an interesting question. So I know Steam has been very wishy-washy. They're trying to not segregate their audience, but how do you feel about censorship in the games? Because Steam is having an issue with that right now. And have you ever had to do anything where you wrote something that had to be censored or not?
Oh, let's see. I mean, I haven't run into this issue myself.
For someone who's worked with Leisure Suit Larry, that seems like something that you would have you would have hit.
Yeah, no, somehow we got away with so much stuff. I'm like, I can't believe if they would have really, I think there's so much stock content in that game. I think whoever was in charge of the ratings, had they actually gone through and listened to it all, it would have never shipped, right? I don't know. Steam is obviously they're one of the biggest distributors of PC games. They kind of, but they don't have a monopoly quite, right? Like if I can simply, I guess, you know, if they ban a game from Steam, that's really rough for the developer as far as distribution and reach. It's not the only place that they can sell their game.
But that's the other thing is, I feel like if someone's like, "Oh, my game was banned on Steam," you're like, "What did you do?" Because it doesn't happen often. I mean, there was recently a game that was the entire game was to rape women, so that one was banned.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have their own. They have to have some standards somewhere, and I guess they get to choose what those standards are. Because at the end of the day, they are. They're not like sometimes I think we think, or you know, there's a tendency sometimes to think about Steam like we would think about the public radio waves or the public airwaves that really belong to the public, and so you would want to have a vigorous debate on what's being banned from these airwaves that are owned by the public, but it's Steam is Valve is a private corporation.
Isn't that interesting though? Because the airwaves are owned by the public, but the fiber that was built by the government is not owned by the public.
No, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that at all.
Right? Like it feels like it should be the opposite.
Yeah.
But you're 100% correct. I mean, that's how it is in reality. I just don't know why, like how he came to this place.
And I think it's the other thing that's interesting too is there's a lot of people that, I mean, they know that other launchers exist, but they don't really care. They just think that if your game didn't make it on Steam, then you're doomed on PC. But you're not. There's the Epic Game Store. We just talked about that.
Whoa! Let's talk about the original, like the Nexon launcher.
Oh God.
Yeah, and the thing is, Steam is, I mean, it comes somewhat. I mean, it is somewhat of a commercial decision, right? I mean, there becomes a tipping point where having the rape simulator is really offensive and angering to a lot of your customers, and what good is it doing?
Yeah. If only 10% of your player base is going to like the game and the other 90 are going to be pissed off about it.
I hope 10% aren't.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's less than 10%.
Yeah. That was a spitball. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Some people are weird. So we gotta derail for 1 second, and I have to ask this question. There's a celebrity who's celebrating a birthday, and he's celebrating his 50th birthday, and every interview we've ever done, we have to ask, what are your thoughts on Paul Rudd?
Paul Rudd. I think I love Paul Rudd. I love that.
Knows the right answers.
Yeah. We haven't gotten a I hate Paul Rudd answer yet. So
I love that he plays that Mac and Me movie clip on when he goes on Conan to promote other films. Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
So apparently he's got this running joke with Conan O'Brien where this has been like 10 years or more. He goes on Conan and Conan's like, okay, great. Let's see a clip of your new movie, Ant-Man. And then they'll cut to that movie, Mac and Me, like a clip of this ridiculously bad movie. And it's the same clip every time. And then they'll come back and Conan will pretend to be pissed, and Paul Rudd. It's really funny. They'd have a compilation video of it on somewhere on.
That's awesome. He's like Rickrolling him.
Yeah.
He like Rickrolls Conan.
We're hoping Paul Rudd is like Beetlejuice, and if we say his name enough times, he'll just come on the show once.
Yeah, he's probably a busy guy. But it could happen. I don't know. He's got to go to Vegas at some point, right?
Yeah, and he can't be that busy if he's a vampire because he just doesn't age.
Yeah. They all come. I mean, every celebrity comes through Vegas at some point. Maybe you can.
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, Nicolas Cage lives here, so maybe he knows him. I don't know why he would, but
yeah, I like one of my security guard friends.
I feel like Nicolas Cage it's not good for him to live in Vegas. I feel like he should.
Yeah, he should probably definitely not be here, especially if he's going to marry women overnight and then get an annulment 4 days later.
No, that's why he lives here.
That's why he lives here. Yeah.
He might have got stuck with her like somewhere else.
I feel like he needs to live in like Norman, Oklahoma.
So, are you a fan of the Marvel universe at all? The Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Yeah, I will just see any superhero movie. I don't care what it is. I kind of like them all. I started really going because my kids were small when they started this thing.
I'd like to challenge you on that for a second, though. Any superhero movie, right? So I have two that a large portion of not even the American audience, but the world audience has never seen. And they're both superhero movies. One is Steel, starring Shaq.
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
It was weird. And then the other, I'm trying to get my girlfriend to watch right now. She's fighting me. It's called Pootie Tang. And it's probably the dumbest it's probably the dumbest superhero movie ever, but it's so funny.
That's a superhero. Well, is it based on a comic book?
I don't know if it's based on a comic book, but it's supposed to be like he's an American superhero who I don't get it. I don't even know how to explain him.
Yeah, no, I should say I've seen, I'm up for any of these new Marvel movies.
There we go.
There's the line. He didn't even say DC.
No, DC. I will go. I have seen all these newer DC films.
Did you see Shazam?
Not yet. I mean, but it just came out.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. It just you got to give me like. I'm never the first person to see it. Like I'm always
a busy guy.
If I play a game or see a movie, it's like 2 or 3 months after everybody else. But I get it. I'm pretty easy to please. My expectations are well calibrated for superhero stuff. And so I started doing it when my kids were small. It was really cool to take them to movies, and now they don't give a shit at all. 15 and 13. So it's like me by myself. I'm trying to finish out the Marvel.
Yeah, at least this saga, because Marvel's still going on after this. There's the hundreds.
Did you read Marvel comics? Do you read?
I'm not a huge, to be honest, I'm not huge into comic books.
Okay.
But as a kid, absolutely. I remember like Daredevil. I think was my first like comic book.
Well, that's probably why he's not in the comics. He started with Daredevil.
Right. It was the first comic book hero that I really, really gravitated to. But I remember when I was really young, I was into them, and into them pretty consistently up until around the age of like 14. And then I really stopped with the superhero stuff. I would still get into anything that was kind of funny. Like I still would read The Tick, or Gru was still funny to me. Milk and Cheese, was fun, and would dip my toe into the occasional like indie graphic novel or something. But by and large, and then doing actually Wrestletopia now for the last couple of years has got me back into wanting to read comics and care about comics. But for me, it's been a lot about like filling in a bunch of gaps. Like,
Sure.
Oh, Alan Moore Swamp Thing. Cool. I just started reading that like last 6 months ago. I started to read that for the first time in my life. And The Invisibles I had never read, and lots of stuff that comic book fans probably read a long time ago. I'm just catching up with now and enjoying it a lot.
Do you buy them, or do you use like Comixology Unlimited, or?
I do both. I have a pull list. I know my local comic book store is actually Otherworlds Comics and Games in Hillsdale, Oregon, in Portland. I have a pull list, and I'm reading Heroes in Crisis now. Is kind of interesting. What else? Oh, I love Jeff Lemire. I really like all his stuff. So Gideon Falls, for example, and the Black Hammer stuff, I'm really digging. So I have a pull list at my local. Comixology is nice for when it's like, oh, I can't find. I have, like Ron at my comic book store will have like issues 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
I need 2.
So I'm going to 2 and read it right away.
Have you ever heard of a comic called Chew?
No, I don't think so.
So
What's that?
this is one I keep trying to push on everybody. I don't know if anybody's gonna like it, but I loved it. So the concept was this guy has a kind of like a superpower where whatever he eats, he sees the last moments of that whatever it was life. So if he eats beef, he saw the last moments of that cow's life, and you can imagine it's probably not pretty good. But he uses this. He becomes a detective, and he would go to the crime scene and he would eat pieces of the body to figure out how they died. And he would, he would be right every time because that was his power. But so he would have to eat the corpse to figure it out. It was really strange and really awkward, but it's out there.
It's pretty brilliant. If that were me, I'd be like, I don't care who killed them, and I'm not going to find out.
Yeah. I don't need to eat them.
You have the superpower, and you're like, I don't ever use it.
Could you eat like one of his fingernails?
They didn't really go into, as long as it was attached to him at one point, I think, or to the person. So you.
I wonder if he had to be tricked, like his, the other detectives would be like, "Hey, you want a donut?" And then they flip in like some flesh.
We know that he has to eat body part. Here, eat this hand. Ha! It wasn't his hand. It was somebody else's hand.
Good God.
Yeah, they're getting.
I would actually be interested in checking that out. Like morbid. It's weird. I tend to write, like I said, even for video games, more lighthearted comedic stuff. That's what I enjoy writing. But when I'm just reading for pleasure, I love reading just sick, morbid, like homicide detective procedural books, and I love that kind of like dark stuff. I don't know what's wrong with me.
No, there's nothing wrong with you. I think that's where everybody has this idea of superheroes that they're all wonderful and stuff, and they're always good, but the ones that have a gray line or sometimes even a darker line, it makes them more interesting, makes them more human, I think.
So what video game do you wish they had tapped you to write something for, or what new game like doesn't exist yet that you would have liked to be picked for?
Being a freelancer and working out of my home from Portland, I get to work on a lot of cool projects, but what you tend to see are studios for whom hiring a full-time writer doesn't really make sense. And so the type of like big, like a Naughty Dog, like The Last of Us, which I love, and those type of games tend to always use like full-time writers. The big one for me would be work on a game that just seamlessly blends a great story and just great action, like The Last of Us. That would be like my dream. Not necessarily even to work on The Last of Us Part 2 or Part 3, but something like that. It is unlikely to happen for me, probably.
But that's fair. I think in terms of story in the last 10 years, Last of Us being almost at the top of everybody's list in writing. That's a good choice to pick that one.
And then there is. I love doing comedy, so doing more there's surprisingly few just straight up comedy in video games where it's just like, it's a first person shooter, but it's like No One Lives Forever people love that game. I think there was No One Lives Forever 2. I don't know if you remember, I think it was actually before the Austin Power movies, but it stars you played, it was a first person shooter where you play like a British special agent, and she kind of had like a kitschy 60s kind of go-go dress on, and the whole thing was a kind of a parody of spy films and that kind of stuff, and it did well, and it was very funny. And there's just very, very few games like that. Oh, well, I'll tell you another one that got away. Like I would still love to do it. I was briefly the writer for Duke Nukem Lives Forever.
Oh, that's one of those ones where you're like, it's cool that I was attached to it, but I'm glad I'm not now because it didn't do so well.
That was really the one that got away because while it was being developed, and this was late in the development, they had tapped me to work on it, and we kind of retroactively fit a story on top of the existing game, which was almost finished. And I was just about to start write dialogue when 3D Realms shut down, and I mean, in my mind, at least, it's going to be really cool and really funny. Like we don't see too many first person shooters that are like, remember the old action movies of the 80s where it was just fun. It was violent, but it was also Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was fun and funny.
Wolfenstein and Doom fall into those.
Yeah, I would love to do a big stupid action comedy first person shooter,
which is funny because we just reported in the news recently, I think it was 2 or 3 episodes ago, that Duke Nukem is coming to Switch in some form or another, and I forget what it was.
Well, that is still around. I still, someday. And then also we talked about the adventure game, like the old Monkey Island stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess if I was going to get even more specific, if they were ever to do yet another, like the Telltale sort of reboot, I thought was great. Played it, I loved it. I thought it was fun. If they ever did that again, that would be my I would work on that for free.
Have you ever seen?
Someone's gonna play this back to you.
Yeah, you said free. Have you ever seen the trailer yet for Trover Saves the Universe?
Troma Saves the Universe.
Trover Saves the Universe. So it's made by Squanch Games, and Squanch is a Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon company.
I had no idea.
Yeah, they are making their own game, and it is exactly in the same vein as Rick and Morty would be, but different characters. But it's their voices, their art, their everything.
Oh wow! I had no clue.
Yeah, that's why I was like, maybe if you say you like the comedy games, look into Squanch Games. They're doing some interesting things.
It's really, really interesting. I almost, one of my heroes is Ron Gilbert, who was kind of the mastermind behind the Monkey Island games. He kind of created that franchise. I almost got to work with him when he was over at Hothead Games in Vancouver, and he was making he was making like a Diablo parody, which I thought was really funny. And the name escapes me, but I almost got to work with him, and it just didn't work out.
I think earlier you compared the video game industry to the movie industry.
Yep.
And I do think like because somebody was complaining to me, somebody who I don't know, she was just like a stereotypical like not geek person.
Yeah.
And she was like, "What, Captain Marvel? Why are there so many superhero movies every year?" And I was like, wait a minute here. There's over 25 romantic comedies per year. I looked it up. Over 25. I was like, so actually, just by odds, there actually should be like another 8 superhero movies per year, every year, forever. But
Plastic Man.
But on the other hand, there isn't in the video game industry. I think there's a shortage of funny. I do think there's a shortage of comedy.
Yeah. And I think quite honestly, if you're a talented comedy writer, you probably, working in Hollywood, right? Like that, you're probably you'll make a lot more money working in Hollywood. And I don't know. I think the mentality of most game developers is that personality wise, they're maybe more into fantasy or sci-fi and not so much making goofy, silly stuff. I don't know. But yeah, there's a real dearth of it.
Yeah. I think technology wise, the funny video games feel like, as far as polish goes, a lot of times they're a little bit behind how smooth and polished the pure action games are. And so it's harder to get into. It's harder to just sit down and start playing.
So I have a comedy series that you guys might like to play.
What's that?
It's called Borderlands.
Okay, that might be a good example because I think, to your point, a lot of the studios that will sort of take a chance to be, irreverent and silly might be the smaller studios that don't have the budgets and don't quite have the tech. But there are exceptions, right? So it might be like Gearbox. I haven't played Borderlands, but it might be that Gearbox is one of those studios that has the money, has the talent, has the technology, and has the degree of independence to say we're just going to make this goofy and we don't care if.
And there's something to that too. I think that if you were to look at the history of video games and you just pick out your own video games and you think, what video games stand out in your head, you might end up with more funny games than action-oriented games. Or because like if you ask me, I'm going to say a lot of Final Fantasy games because that's my thing. But I'm also thinking of stuff like Crash Bandicoot and Conker's Bad Fur Day, Gex Enter the Gecko. Those are all like really funny games, and that was why I liked them so much.
They stand out if you get the humor right.
Yes,
there's a lot less to compete against it. Or I don't know if that's true. I mean, but it just stands out, right?
Yeah.
Amongst all.
And going back even further, you got Booger Man and Toe Jam and Earl. Those are some interesting games too.
Even Leisure Larry. I mean, you say Leisure Larry, and even like my parents who are approaching 70 know who Leisure Suit Larry is.
He's just a guy who's down and out and just can't get lucky anytime.
He's a lovable loser,
Yeah.
Character.
Well,
yeah.
I think Oregon time is pretty late, so I think we don't want to keep you up much later.
I appreciate it.
He's like, I'm falling asleep right now.
You wanna pitch anything to remind anybody?
Just Free Comic Book Day. I think it's what is it, May 4th, Saturday. It's
usually Star Wars Day. I think is when May Comic Book Day falls
on Saturday. So please go to your local comic book shop and buy something.
Preferably buy Planet Invasion to Planet.
Well, I would just say for free you can get Starburns Presents #2, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. So there'll be pages from Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia, which is our comic book, and which will then be available digitally on Comixology. The first 3 issues should be available right around then. But then in the Starburns Presents #2, there's also a great story called Nasquatch, which is a NASCAR driving Sasquatch. There is a story in there called B Squad. They've got an ongoing title called Malicious, which is kind of like Calvin and Hobbes, only if Calvin were in hell and his parents were like Satan.
I think this entire line of comics is something that I'm more suited towards.
Honestly, please go pick up Starburns Presents #2. There's going to be a lot of really cool, fun, interesting, funny stuff in there besides Wrestletopia. So, there'll be something there that people will gravitate
Absolutely.
to. So but thank you. This was a lot of fun. Frankie, I'd love to get a glimpse of Frankie before.
Frankie, get in here. He's trying.
If you watch the video afterwards.
Hey, Frankie. But thanks, guys. Really appreciate it, and I feel honored to be the first one to do this remotely.
Well, I think we're just as honored to have someone who's of your caliber be on the show.
Yeah.
Period.
Well, now that makes me feel just sad for you.
we just love so many of the things on your LinkedIn. We're like, wow, this guy's super cool.
You just ruined it for me.
I know. It's just one of those things
that just gave away who listens to our podcast.
Here's the thing. Like a lot of times, because we like Frankie works in conventions a lot. I'm press in a lot of conventions, and I always realize that I'm like, see that guy with like a line around the corner, and then see that girl who's a super hot actress from a movie that, let's say, like a big movie like Terminator 4 or something, and I'm like, see how nobody wants to talk to her? That guy is a rock star in this convention.
Yes, he is.
So it's all just in your community. So you're a rock star with us.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate very much, and it's fun to come on and anytime. Maybe we'll hit you again when we have some more stuff under our belt, and
Oh, we'll definitely keep an eye out for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, even next time you're in Vegas, hit us up.
Yeah.
We'll do a live interview.
Yeah, at a convention or whatever.
Honestly, kind of, I say this out loud to my wife every once in a while. Like, we haven't been to Vegas in a long time. And she doesn't say. I don't think she.
I'll tell you what. like Richard over here said, I work for a lot of the Las Vegas conventions. Trade info if you want me to level up's too soon, but I work for ShineCon and Savicon. If you want to go and look at those their websites, tell me. You can email Richard and give him your info, and he'll give you my info, and we can talk about having you show up at one of the conventions if you want.
Oh, that'd be great. I really have been sort of wanting to go back to Vegas at some point to humiliate myself. But thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
We
No problem.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
I can't see you, but I can feel you all the time in my head.